life, I wouldn't have a second chance. And I always grew up in a house with alcohol. Everybody in my family drank, except for my mom. I don't think she's ever drank maybe a wine cooler. But I remember my dad would take us on Christmas Day, and we'd be sitting in the bar watching them drink while we're sitting there. People would be trying to talk to us and stuff like that, and I'm like, why can't I be with the other kids? And I always felt like my life was different because we were sitting over, following my dad around, and then when I turned 16, my dad just got up and left one day. And so I raised 5 brothers and sisters, helped my mom out. And so I knew that the first chance I got, I was going to leave. I was going to find my own life. And I'll never forget that, my mom one day decided to get remarried and met my stepdad, and it was time for me to go. But my stepdad was a big influence in my life, where my dad wasn't. And my stepdad drank. He had a lot of problems. But he was he taught us stuff, taught us how to work hard and always, he even talked to us about the Lord, even though he was drunk when he was talking to us. But, it got me seeking something better, even though it took a long time. For many years, I tried church, and the churches would always tell me, if you got a haircut, you'd be just like us. If you got rid of your earrings and stuff like that. So I always had a problem with church. And so I started just saying, well, I don't need them. I can do this on my own. And I got married, and of course, 11 years of marriage of my first wife, alcohol problems, running around on each other, stuff like that. One day I get a phone call, and my first wife had died from a drug overdose. I had been trying to get everybody to try to help me get her off drugs, and didn't know how, didn't know what I was going to do. But one day, after losing 2 houses, 3 cars, got a phone call, and my wife is dead, from a drug overdose. So that set me off on a whole different track now, because up until the end, I had tried drugs. I'd ran around with some gangs, had a gang of my own before that. And I just knew I didn't want to go back to the gang lifestyle. I wanted something else, and didn't know what. So for years, for a couple of months there, a buddy of mine kept saying, well, try this, try that. Next thing you know, we're smoking crack, and we're riding around Clayton County, just riding around, just high as could be, didn't care about nobody, We'd ride up on a roadblock. Thought it was funny. What they gonna do, lock us up? Ride right through it. They'd say, what, go on, go ahead. And so we thought, we can't be stopped. Driving around 18-wheelers, high all the time, and just pulled into a convenience store late one night, and the cops come out with shotguns, run us off, drug dealer still in the truck. And we're going down the road, get the drugs off of him, throw him out. We're just riding. Now we got drug dealers mad. Well, we didn't care, what they gonna do to us, So that continued, and buddy of mine, well, actually my cousin, he wants to join the old group, and I said, well, we're retired. We're not even running around no more. He said, well, I want to be just like you. He had showed me a truck. He done started driving a truck. He wanted to be just like me. A few hours later, that young man died in a truck wreck. Came, crashed that truck right there, right in front of us. Killed him instantly. We thought he was still alive. We seen something come out. And I don't know if anybody believes in demons, but let me tell you something. That night, I know what a demon was. And it took his life. And it took me a long time to get over that, because I still think about it today, But anyway, a few months later, I got so messed up on drugs that night I couldn't even speak no more. And I was going to kill 4 people in that house. Little did I remember, though, there was 2 other people in that house that for a long time I didn't even think about at that time that they were still in the house. That was my daughter and the other man's daughter, that I was going to take his life. And, and so I walk out the house, and the only thing on my mind was I'm going to kill somebody. I was high on drugs. And I kept hearing something as I'm walking out of the house. And I get in this truck, and it's telling me, you're not going to do this. And I had no clue who at first. But then I couldn't get out of the truck. I couldn't unlock the door, and every time I tried to crank the truck up, it wouldn't even click. So I'm like, next thing you know, I'm arguing with this voice that I'm hearing. And then I realized who it was. It was the Lord speaking to me that day. And that night I got off drugs. I never craved them, never wanted to turn back, and I asked God, I said, but I got to get out of this area. And 2 weeks later, after arguing with my ex-sister-in-law about how she said that I would never become nobody, you're never going to do nothing with your life. And I said, oh yeah, I am. And she said, why? And I said, well, it ain't for you. I know that. It's going to be for me. And I knew that day is that offered that man, his name is Charles Mitchell. When Charles Mitchell's offered me a place to leave Georgia and go to Mississippi for a while, I said, all right, you know what, I'm going to take that. And I left. And I was like, but the alcohol was still there. God delivered me from the drugs that night. But the alcohol was still there, and I'm like, I got to get off of this, and as long as I stay here, this ain't where I'm not going to get what I need out of here. So I left there and went to Louisville, Kentucky. And one Sunday I'm driving down the road, and I said, God, I've been running from you for a long time. And I said, and you know how I feel about going into a church. I said, but if you'll send somebody my way, I'm yours. 2 hours later, the phone rang. I got invited to church for the first time in a long time. And so I was like, oh, I'll go. And the young lady was like, well, you don't have to if you don't want to. And I said, no, you don't understand. I've got to go. And so I got involved in church out there, and for 2 years I drove 45 minutes to go to church every Sunday, Wednesdays if I could catch it, but I knew there was more to it. I was like, there's more to just going to church. There's got to be something else. And I had been going to a prison, 5-hour drive, and I'd go out there at least once a month. And there was a young lady that I had been writing, and she was in prison. And when I was going out there to visit with her, I felt like God was calling me into prison ministry. And I was like, because I was talking to people out there that were waiting in line to get in. I was talking to the inmates in there, and I was like, I was just talking to everybody that would listen. And some of them didn't want to hear it, but anyway. So I got back one Saturday, and the young lady called me, and I told her, I said, can you call me back? There's a movie coming on. It's about some kind of ministry. I need to hear this. And so this guy had been in prison about 8 years. And so I started listening to his story. And his name was Tom Miller. And so I heard his story and everything, and how he had got saved in prison. And I was thinking to myself, man, this was catching my attention, and I knew I was being called into prison ministry. By the time that movie was over, I knew what I needed to do. God confirmed that I would be doing prison ministry, and so I was thinking I would love to talk to this man. And so for years I searched for his story and everything, and could not find it. And so I moved back to Georgia, and the Lord blessed me with a new wife and a new family. And so I'm like, well, this a lot of things are happening. God's moving, opening opportunities for me. And I got home on a Thursday and told my wife, Christy, about prison ministry, about what God was putting in my life. And on Sunday morning, there was a man that's sitting there, and he hands me a bulletin. He said, would you be interested in prison ministry? I said, well, You know, yeah, I was like, thank you, Lord, because I mean, things were just starting to open up, and I'm thinking, and we got involved in prison ministry, and we started going to a women's prison first, and then there was some things that was going on, and I felt like God needed to move me out of there, but I knew I was still going to be involved in prison ministry. Next thing you know, He put me in Cairo's prison ministry, and where I'm still there today, still doing that. And so back in, I think it was in about February of this year, I started seeking this man's ministry, and Tom Miller's ministry. And I was thinking, I'd like to get a hold of this guy. And hadn't had no success before. And I finally that night, I just clicked on, typed it in just a certain way, and it took me right to his website. And so I left him a message on there and didn't hear from him. And in March of this year, 10 years after, the Lord saved me from going to prison for the rest of my life, probably, 2014, I walked into death row to minister there to those men. But the night before that, that pastor, Tom Miller, gave me a call. He called me back that night. And I was like, man, I was a nervous wreck, kind of like I was earlier today. I was a nervous wreck. I'm going into death row. And I tried that guy's number one more time. And before I could get home, I drive an 18-wheeler. So before I could get home, he calls me. We talked for about 30 minutes. And then he called me back later, about an hour later, and we talked about another hour or so. And so it was just a great opportunity, and so I get to go into death row the next day. God opened that door because I always wanted to do death row. I felt like that was something that I needed because 10 years ago I could have been a resident there. So I felt like I needed to be there. I needed to go and see those men. And when I walked in there, they brought me and another pastor went in, and they brought 5 inmates in, and they took the cuffs off, and we were sitting in the same cell with these guys, and I never felt, the only thing I felt there was the presence of the Lord. And so I was like, I don't know, when I get the opportunity to come back or what, but just having that opportunity was just God just opening doors for me and taking me to those places where He needed me to go. And so we've had a lot of different opportunities with Second Chance Ministry to minister on the streets, to minister to troubled teens, prisons. We've gotten a chance to minister with another group called the Misfits Tent Ministry. Just so many different things. And it's all because the Lord has just opened those doors for me. And back in June, I was ordained through Tom Miller's ministry. It's called Special Visit Ministries. And so I got to, after just talking to him on the phone just a few months later, I was sitting at the man's door, he invited me over. And I ate supper with him and was able to spend time with him. I even got to ride in his limo. And so I was like, man, I felt great. He came pick me up and spent, several hours with him and everything. Has been, talked to him on the phone a lot. And he's just been one of those that has encouraged me in that type of ministry and other men that I seek, that just teach me different things as I go. Because I tell you what, I don't know it all, and I hope I never do, because then that's going to lead me back into the problems. But one of the things I will say, is that God has brought me through a lot in order for me, and I think a lot of times some of the lifestyles, the things that I've done, the drugs, the alcohol, I can't say I regret it, because then I couldn't reach those people that I do. Because when I see that guy on drugs, I know what he's going through. I may not know his personal life, but I know what that felt like for me. I remember being so drunk, I don't even know how I got home. Being so high on drugs that the only reason that I knew how I got home was because we sat in a room just passing that pipe around. Now, when we were smoking crack, we was driving all over everywhere. I mean, and so I knew that eventually that was going to catch up with us. And I've been able to talk to those young kids. The guy that me and him used to run around, he still hasn't called me. He knows my number and all that now. And I would like to talk to him because, I want to let him know with what God has delivered me from. Now, his kids told me once, just recently, well, there's no hope for my mom and dad. And I said, wait a minute. I was with your mom and dad running around partying. Oh, yeah, there's still hope. I said, just let me talk to them. Tell them to call me. I'm still waiting on that phone call, and I hope they'll call me. And just like the young man that lost his life, I faced his family. I avoided them for a long time. I remember having to talk to the police about that man's death and everything, and I was like, I could go to prison for this, And he said, I remember those words. He said, I want to be just like you. And he died that night. So I hope that, when people say I want to be like you, it's because they're talking about the new me. And even my older kids, my son called me up the other day and talking about getting married and everything. And I told him, I said, I hope I can be there. I mean, if you invite me, I'm going to do what I can to be there. He came to live with me after he got out of jail for a little while. And he got up and left one day. He didn't say bye or nothing, but he's still struggling with stuff. But I know God's got a calling on his life too. Because great musician. I know that God can use him in so many different ways. But I encourage any young people that if you're going through drugs, you're going through some stuff like that, man, just start seeking God. Because what, so many times when we're on drugs, we think we're not good enough. And I'll tell you what, that's what I felt. That, when the churches were turning me away. And I still get some of that some places, because they don't understand, the type of ministry that a lot of us do. They don't understand that, and they feel, I don't know whether it's threatened or what, but I feel like, we still don't. When they say we can't do it here, well, then we need to find a place to go do it, because there's just so many people that are so lost out there. And I just seeking what God wants for us to do next. Whether He wants me to go out and buy a tent and go out and start doing ministries every weekend, I don't know. I feel that He's leading and opening doors for that, and but we'll see what's next. And the only thing I can say is that these days I'm not high on drugs, but I am high on Jesus Christ. Thank you.